Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going deep on something I know a lot of you are thinking about these days, and that's the possible connection between e-cigarettes and cancer.
It's definitely a hot topic, and there's been a lot of buzz lately.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which is why we're here to cut through the hype. We've got a couple of great sources to help us out today. A news article from Medical Express that breaks down some recent research, and then we're going right to the source, the actual study itself, published in scientific reports.
You're going deep, folks.
Right to the bottom of this. So let's start with this study. What did they actually find?
Well, it was a smaller study, I'll admit, that right off the bat, just 30 people, split evenly between those who exclusively use e-cigarettes and those who don't.
Okay, so a small sample size.
Right, and the samples themselves are actually from way back, from the Population Assessment of Tobacco and Health study, the PATH study, from 2013-2014.
So what they found was 4 specific microRNAs, these tiny molecules that were more active or upregulated is the scientific term, in the blood of the vapors. But, and this is important, none of those were actually statistically significant once they factored in other things.
So 4 microRNAs more active, but not statistically significant. Okay, but what does that even mean? What about the link to cancer?
Well, they found that if they narrowed it down and just looked at the white participants, one of those microRNAs, this one's called HAR200B3P, that one was significantly upregulated in the e-cigarette users.
Okay. Before we go any further, though, I think we should probably back up a sec because we're throwing around microRNAs like everyone knows what we're talking about.
You're right, good point.
Can you give us a quick breakdown? What are microRNAs and why should we even care about them?
So microRNAs are these tiny, tiny molecules that actually control gene expression, think of them as dimmer switches, controlling how much protein a gene makes.
Oh, okay. I'm kind of getting that.
They're involved in a whole bunch of stuff in the body. Cell growth, development, all that. And, importantly for this study, cancer development.
So changes in these microRNA dimmer switches could be like a warning sign that something's not quite right, maybe even before any symptoms show up.
Exactly. That's one of the reasons this research is so cool. It's looking at these tiny molecular level changes for clues about the long-term effects of e-cigarettes.
That makes sense. So back to the study, they found these microRNAs were more active in e-cigarette users. How did they connect that back to cancer, though?
They use something called gene enrichment analysis. So basically, they took those upregulated microRNAs and looked at what they might be doing in the body. They cross-referenced them with these huge databases of cellular processes.
So kind of like comparing notes.
Yeah, exactly. And what they saw was that these microRNAs, they're involved in pathways related to different kinds of cancer, lung cancer, liver cancer, pancreatic cancer.
Not great.
And even other pathways, like the hippo signaling pathway and the HIF1 signaling pathway.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there for a second. Can we translate that into, plain English? What are those pathways, and what do they have to do with cancer?
Okay, so think of the hippo signaling pathway, as the city planner,
Yeah.
making sure that cells grow in an organized way. But when the hippo pathway gets messed up, it's like construction chaos, uncontrolled growth, which is basically what a tumor is.
Oh, okay, I get that.
And the HIF1 pathway, that one's all about how cells react when there's not enough oxygen. When that one goes haywire, it's often linked to tumor growth and, even worse, metastasis.
Wow, even how our cells breathe can be affected. This is wild. So this study suggests a possible link between vaping and cancer, but does that mean everyone who vapes is definitely going to get cancer?
No, it's important to remember, this doesn't mean cause and effect. This was a small study, like we talked about, and we need more research, bigger studies, to confirm what they found and understand the full picture, the whole scope of the risks.
Right, it's just one piece of the puzzle. But it is interesting that they found changes at, the molecular level that seems pretty significant. Anything else from the study stand out to you?
What was really interesting to me? They actually took one of those microRNAs, the HACMER125B5P, and they tested it out in the lab using real human bronchial cells.
Bronchial cells, those are the cells in your airways, right?
Exactly. And when they overexpressed this microRNA, basically made the cells produce more of it, it actually slowed down wound healing and caused more DNA damage in those cells.
Wait, hold up. DNA damage. Isn't that like a major step in how cancer develops?
Yeah, it is. So this finding, it suggests that this particular microRNA, which is more active in e-cigarette users, could be contributing to changes in the cells that might make cancer more likely.
Okay, so this is all starting to make sense. But remember earlier you said the findings were only significant in the white participants? What's up with that? Does that mean other groups aren't at risk?
That's a great question, and it's something we have to be super careful about. This study was so small, it's really hard to say for sure whether there are real differences between racial groups. We definitely need more research, bigger studies, and more diversity in those studies to see if there really are differences in how e-cigarettes affect different people.
So it could be a fluke or it could be something real. Either way, it's definitely something we need to look into more. Something else I was thinking about, e-cigarettes, they're still fairly new and they've changed a lot over the years. I wonder if that makes a difference to the results of this study.
That's such a good point. We have to remember, these blood samples are from way back in 2013, 2014, when the first generation of e-cigarettes was more common. Those were much simpler devices. A lot of them use natural nicotine. Nowadays, you've got fourth-generation devices with nicotine salts and all this fancy tech.
So the e-cigarettes people are using today are totally different from the ones in this study. Does that mean this research is, like, irrelevant now?
It's definitely something to think about. I mean, we really need more research to figure out if the new devices have similar effects on these microRNAs and these cancer-related pathways, or maybe even greater effects. It's a huge area for more research.
And one last thing, this study relied on people self-reporting their e-cigarette use, right? They didn't actually measure how much people were exposed.
Right. It was all self-reported data, which is another limitation. Future studies, ideally, would have some way to actually measure exposure to give us a clearer picture of the link between vaping and these molecular changes.
This is fascinating stuff. We're learning so much about the potential impact of e-cigarettes. Clearly, there's so much more we need to learn. What are your thoughts on what we've uncovered so far?
It's pretty amazing how much information we can get from these tiny little molecules. We're getting a glimpse into the inner workings of our cells and the possible long-term effects of vaping. It's a reminder that even small changes at the cellular level can have big impacts on our health.
Yeah, and what's really striking me is, we hear a lot about the immediate effects of vaping, like coughing and sore throat, but this is about the long-term stuff, changes at the DNA level. That's serious.
Absolutely. This research highlights how important it is that we keep studying the long-term effects of e-cigarettes.
Well, we've covered a ton of ground in this first part of our deep dive, but we're just getting started. When we come back, we'll be taking an even closer look at the specific microRNAs in this study and what they do in those cancer pathways. Stick with us.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we jump into those specifics, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about how much e-cigarettes have changed. It really is amazing how fast this technology is moving, and it does make you wonder if these newer devices might be affecting our health in ways we don't even know about yet.
Yeah, it feels like the Wild West out there with all these new vaping products popping up. But let's get back to those microRNAs we were talking about, those 4 that were upregulated in all the e-cigarette users. They had some pretty crazy names like HA-BIR-105P, HSA-MIR-125A5P, and HS-MIR-125B5P, and HSA-MIR-99A5P. Whoa! I'm guessing each one of those does something different.
You got it. Each of these little guys regulates different genes, so they have their own unique effects on what's going on in the cells. Take HSA-MIR-105P, for example. It's been linked to quite a few things, actually: endometriosis, stomach adenocarcinoma, even Alzheimer's disease.
Whoa, so this one tiny molecule is involved in all that. That's a little scary.
Right. It seems to be involved in a lot of stuff related to cell growth and survival, so finding it upregulated in e-cigarette users is, well, it definitely raises a red flag.
Okay, so that's 1 down, 3 to go. What about HSA-MIR-125A5P? What's the deal with that one?
Now, this one's really interesting. It's actually considered a tumor suppressor in a lot of cancers.
Hold on, a tumor suppressor. But you said it was upregulated in the e-cigarette users. Wouldn't that mean it's, doing its job and suppressing tumors? I'm a little lost.
That's the thing. Usually, it works to prevent tumors from forming. But in this case, it being upregulated might mean that things aren't working quite right. It could be a sign that the body's trying to fight off something harmful, like those tiny little tattletales we were talking about before, saying, hey, Something's wrong here.
So it's like a distress signal. The cells are sensing something's off and trying to fix it.
Exactly. It just shows how complex these systems are and how even small changes can have big consequences.
This is getting more and more interesting. Okay, what about those last two, HI-MIR-125B5P and HA-MIR-99A5P? What do they do?
Well, both of those are known to be involved in regulating inflammation and cell growth, which are, of course, key processes that can go wrong in cancer. HA-MIR-125B5P specifically has been shown to have immunosuppressive activity.
And if I remember right, that was the one they tested in the lab with those human bronchial cells, right? The one that messed with wound healing and caused more DNA damage?
Yep, that's the one. Those findings definitely add to the concern about what this particular microRNA might be doing to the cells. Now, with HA-MIR-99A5P, we know it helps regulate inflammation and cell growth, but we need more research to understand exactly what it's doing in the context of vaping and cancer.
So we've got 4 microRNAs, all potentially linked to cancer, though we need more research to know for sure. Now, what about that 5th one, the one that was significant in the white participants? H80ASA-MIR-R200B3P. That one was a bit of a mystery, right?
Oh yeah, that was a fascinating one. It's like a multitasker involved in a whole bunch of different cellular processes, cell growth, differentiation, even processes related to aging and longevity.
Wait, longevity? You mean vaping could be the fountain of youth? I'm not so sure about that.
Huh? I wouldn't go that far. While it's involved in those pathways, if it gets messed up, it's also linked to a bunch of different cancers, like renal cell carcinoma, prostate cancer.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It might have some good effects, but it also has the potential to do some serious damage. And again, the fact that it was only significant in the white participants just shows that we need way more research to figure out if e-cigarettes affect people of different races in different ways. This is a complicated puzzle with a lot of pieces still missing.
You said it. It really is. We've uncovered a lot about these microRNAs, but we've barely scratched the surface.
Totally. And speaking of scratching the surface, we still need to unpack those cancer pathways and what the gene enrichment analysis tells us about them. And we're back. Okay, so those cancer pathways, we kind of left things hanging there. Before the break, we were getting into how these microRNAs, those tiny cellular traffic cops, could be linked to some pretty serious stuff. You mentioned gene enrichment analysis, but what does that actually tell us? How do these microRNAs and the genes they're messing with actually contribute to cancer?
So that's where it gets really interesting. The researchers took those target genes, the ones regulated by those upregulated microRNAs, and they basically plugged them into these databases like Gene Ontology and KEGG is kind of like cross-referencing them with this giant library of cellular processes, seeing where they fit in and what they might be doing.
So they're looking for patterns, connections, seeing which cellular pathways these genes are involved in.
Yeah, exactly. And what they found was that these target genes, they're involved in a whole bunch of cancer-related pathways. We're talking lung cancer, liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, all those scary ones.
Oh, yeah, I remember those. But how does that actually work? How do these microRNAs and genes actually cause cancer? Can you give me a concrete example?
Let's take the hippo signaling pathway, for example. Usually this pathway keeps organ size in check and stops tumors from growing. But when it gets messed up, cells start growing like crazy, which is, the hallmark of cancer.
So those microRNAs we talked about, they could be screwing up the hippo pathway and making cells go haywire.
Yeah, kind of like that. It's like they're messing with a city planner and letting construction go wild, building that tumor city.
That's a good way to put it. And it's not just the hippo pathway, right? There was that HIF1 signaling pathway too.
Right, the one that controls how cells deal with low oxygen. And when that one gets messed up, it's often linked to tumor growth and metastasis, which is how cancer spreads.
So even how our cells breathe can be affected. It's amazing how it's all connected. And it makes you realize even tiny changes, at the molecular level, can have these huge ripple effects throughout the body.
Absolutely. It's like a domino effect, one disruption leading to another.
This is all so complex. Clearly, we've still got a lot to learn about the long-term effects of e-cigarettes.
We definitely do. And this research is a good reminder that what we know about e-cigarettes is changing all the time. We're learning more about how they affect our bodies, way down at the molecular level, but there's still so many unknowns.
Especially since, like we talked about earlier, the people in this study were using older e-cigarettes. It makes you wonder what those newer devices with all the bells and whistles are doing to our cells.
Right. That's a huge question that needs answering. And it's not the only one. We need more research, bigger studies, more diversity in those studies. We need to see how different e-liquids and devices affect those microRNAs. And the big question, of course, is whether these changes in microRNA activity actually mean people are more likely to get cancer. Lots more to learn.
Sounds like we've got a lot more deep dives ahead of us, but for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've looked at this possible link between e-cigarettes and cancer, explored those microRNAs, and learned a bit about how our cells grow and react to their environment.
We sure have. It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope this has helped our listeners think about this complex issue and that they can use this information to have informed discussions about the potential risks and benefits of e-cigarettes.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, right? The more we understand about how these devices interact with our bodies, the better decisions we can make about our health. And for anyone who wants to dig even deeper, you can find the full study we talked about today. We've included a link in the episode description. Definitely check it out.
There's always more to learn. And as we wrap things up, I thought I'd leave you with a question to think about. If scientists could analyze your microRNA profile, would you share that data with them to help researchers figure out the long-term effects of e-cigarette use? Something to ponder.
It really is. It makes you think about how we can all play a part in moving science forward and creating a healthier future. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into e-cigarettes and cancer. Until next time, stay curious.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.